Hello and welcome to the Society with Fatma Shaheen at BTV World. Today on our show, we'll be talking about the ever-evolving socio-cultural norms and practices which have completely changed the way we not only celebrate marriages but actually conduct marriage festivities too. This is something upon which we'd be shedding light. In this regard, we generally see this trend that now people are very voluntarily actually opting to have more simpler weddings. They are also very voluntarily opting to have destination weddings too. Whereas, of course, in this regard, we do see the socio-cultural norms being redefined more so because of the influx of social media. What is equally important to understand is the fact that has this in one way or has this not impacted the way the Pakistani marriage contract, that is the nikah, and this is also something upon which we'll be shedding light. We'll be generally talking about the importance of this extremely important document, that what are the do's and what are the don'ts of filling this marriage contract out, what are the things that people should especially look out for, and we'll be giving you not only an Islamic but also a legal and social perspective on this very issue too. All of this today, that too with a very enlightened panel. Let me introduce you to my today's panel. My first panelist for today's show is Justice Retired Nasra Iqbal Saiba, who's been a former judge of the High Court. Assalamu alaikum ji and welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us. Alongside her, I have Ms. Khatija Bukhari, who's not only a legal expert, but she's also a social worker. Assalamu alaikum ji and welcome to the show.
Wa alaikum assalam, thank you.
And my third panelist for today's show is Ustaz Waqar Nawaz Sahab, who's a religious scholar. Assalamu alaikum sir and welcome to the show.
Wa alaikum assalam, thank you very much.
You're most welcome. Now, to get the conversation started with you, madam, first things first, when we do talk about the ever-changing and ever-evolving marriage and, of course, wedding trends in this way, we do see that, for one, we generally have observed that in some quarters of the Pakistani society, there have been more simpler weddings. Then there's also been the strata of the Pakistani society, which has very voluntarily also opted for perhaps destination weddings. But if you were to then overall analyze, what do you feel have been the positives and what do you feel have been the negatives of these ever-changing marriage and wedding celebration trends?
The first thing which I'm very pleased with is that the Federal Shariat Court has declared during the past year that age of marriage can be fixed by the state.
Right.
Before that, you know, there was all kinds of speculation that Aisha Siddiqa got married at the age of 9 years, even though that was proved by evidence that that was not correct. And all these kinds of things led to a over-subscription towards having children. Every family thought if they don't have 5 or 6 children, their family was not complete. And with the kind of population explosion we are having and the kind of land we are having, I don't think we can afford to have this kind of situation.
Right.
Really.
And one more positive, if you were to look at it from an objective viewpoint, is also the fact that, madam, generally we do see that perhaps there is now greater awareness of the marriage contract, because we do see this growing trend of people and now entering prenuptial agreements too on the kind of work they do want to do, on the kind of arrangement that they want to have post-marriage.
Everybody should read the nikah before the wedding date, and the couple should get together and decide what they want and what they do not want, so that there's no quarrel over this kind of thing or disagreement on the day of the marriage.
Right, madam. On which I'll come to you, Ms. Khatija, and here we must talk about the fact that, yes, of course, knowledge of the nikah is extremely important. But when we talk about the practicality, how aware do you find the average Pakistani to be regarding their marriage law-related rights? And in this particular context, I would want you to draw attention upon the rights of women, because we do understand that women are the ones which are more severely affected if they are not going to read the very important terms of the marriage contract.
Exactly, absolutely. I think marriage contract is the thing that is binding both the parties together. And unfortunately, what I have seen, and this is not about any particular class, this runs across the board, that people are not aware about the nikah because they just simply do not read it. They do not think that they should read it. And where they want to read it and think about it, they do not have access to read it. So that there are a couple of like multi-layered problems that are in this. And why is that the case? Because our attention is diverted on other issues. For example, when we're thinking thinking and planning a wedding, we don't have a ceremony that is where we would want to read the nikah. For example, there are now even ceremonies like bridal showers, and we have so much, you know, time and energy spent on what the menu will be, what the decorations
what clothes you will
will
wear,
be, what clothes you'll wear, you know, matching colors, lights, everything
what
is
the
on
social
that
media
list.
cover will also be like.
Exactly. Every single thing is supposed to be perfect, but that thing, that one particular document that is a legal document that binds you, is not seen at that moment, is not discussed.
Which is very unfortunate, because you see the entire institution of marriage to start off with is based on that civil contract. Which I'll come to you, Waqar Sahab, and here we must talk about the very importance of actually understanding and delving and deliberating upon each and every term of the Pakistani marriage contract. So would you please tell us that what is the Islamic stance on the same? Why is it so important, even from an Islamic viewpoint, to sit back, understand and negotiate the terms of this very civil contract?
Very good question, Ms. Fatima. Thank you very much,
You're
first of all,
most
giving you the
welcome, sir.
opportunity and with such an honorable panel here.
You're most welcome.
The first thing is, Islam always focuses on the balance and equality. So if there's a misconception that, okay, the more the rights of the boys is being taken care of, right, and the girl is not being considered much, it's not the case, right? She has full rights, number one, and so it's very important that it should be practiced. Number one thing is nikah is the program or that event which actually makes everything possible.
Right, of course.
Right? So it's just like, it's a nucleus of the whole event, and we ignore it. So we have just made it a ritual sort of a thing. So number one, that attitude needs to go. Now in terms of focusing on those requirements and all that, the reason why many a times we don't focus is because the people who are registering is a secondary, the people who are conducting the nikah.
Exactly. This is something that we were earlier discussing as well. And Madam, you would also want to comment on this from the viewpoint of the nikah khwah, or for that matter the nikah registrar. Sir, I think you've made some very valid points here. When we talk about the respective role of either or both of them, what are the responsibilities of them? They tell the parties, yes, this is the marriage contract, these are your respective roles and responsibilities, and it's very important that everything that you dictate to me should be entered into very accurately, because we do understand that any kind of an inaccuracy this way could also be a possible crime.
Nikah Khan could be anybody. I could be able to perform a nikah. You would be able to perform a nikah, any one of us. But it's the nikah registrar who actually registers it with the Union Council, who is pinned with this responsibility, and there are many case laws on this, that he should be totally aware of his responsibility, and he should ensure that the nikah nama has been read out to both parties, and they should know what it contains, and only then they should sign it. But actually what happens is, he crosses out what he wants and he leaves in what he wants, and the parties don't know. That's why I said earlier that at least a week before, both the parties should get together, the boy and the girl, and they should check a nikah nama. It only costs what, 2 rupees or now maybe 5 rupees with the rising of expenses. And in 5 rupees, if you can just buy a copy, photocopy of the nikah nama, you must study it in full depth and figure out what you want and where you want it, and then take it to the nikah registrar, and he should have no authority to change it after it has been filled in by the couple.
Right. And in this regard, then it's very important then to also talk about the important terms of the marriage contract too, because we do see that this is something upon which there has been some dispute. That term of dower, on which we do see maybe marriage is also falling apart, and then in this regard we can't ignore the clause 18 of the nikah nama as well, which talks about a woman's right, delegated right to seek divorce. So when we talk about these various rights, what are those things that women especially need to be very careful of, Madam?
First of all, I think a woman should always have a delegated right of divorce. There is no reason for her not to have it. She has the right of khula, but that means still that she has to go to a court. But the delegated right of divorce means that she has exactly the same right as the male spouse, that she can dissolve the marriage even at home, in the presence of two witnesses, and that's the end of the matter. That she should know, and she should have that right conferred on her when she is signing the marriage contract, but normally that is just crossed out by the nikah
Exactly,
card.
which is why I precisely posed this question.
And it's the nikah registrar who is responsible for it. And
But
he
even
has,
by her family members, madam, we've also seen celebrations and wedding festivities where the family members also, they cross it out, and they even think that it is something which could perhaps bring shame to the family if she talks about it at the very outset. I myself have witnessed such weddings where people associate stigma with giving women this right. Sir, in this regard, I would want you to delve upon clause 18 of the Pakistani Nikah, which very clearly talks about a wife's delegated right of divorce. So could you please tell us that what is the Islamic stance on the same, and why is it so important to clarify at the very outset? This is definitely something which is just not un-Islamic.
First of all, as Justice Sahiba said, this is a crucial time before the nikah ceremony happens, that you decide all these details. In Islam, she has, if that right has been delegated to her, she has that right. And as you said, that came from the Sharia as well. So, but again, it's the cultural, it's more than legal, it's more than a cultural stigma. Like some people say, oh, you're talking about talaq on this beautiful day?
Exactly.
Right? So, when this type of thing, so it's very important to educate the people. So, for example, when we conduct nikahs, it's a 2 to 4 weeks exercise. The documentation, then the consent, and then all of this, the agreement, all the clauses are being discussed with both parties and all that. And sometimes they come up with it. We thought it's just a 5 minutes job, and you have made it a 4 weeks job. What is this?
But you see, it's all worth that time, that hassle, all that energy that is being put in. But coming towards you, Khadija, here we must talk about few things, very noticeable trends that we do see changing in the Pakistani society over a period of time. Generally, be it this general practice of getting married late, as per the typical Pakistani societal standards, be it for that matter not marrying at all, or even for that matter making your celebrations all about social media, because social media, as we understand, has changed the entire institution of marriage. So being the youngest on the panel, how would you perceive this?
I think coming to the first point in terms of, eventually it's the choice of the parties. The choice is really important. Is there consent in the marriage? That's the thing that needs to be taken into account. Have they read the terms and conditions of the nikah? Because that's the document that binds them. And so therefore, if it is their personal choice to get married at a certain age, that should be respected, because ultimately they are the ones that have to take this marriage forward in the real sense. And they should have a mutual understanding on this point. As so far as social media is concerned, I think, again, a personal choice, but I do understand the point that it shouldn't all be about what it looks rather than what it is. And I will come back to this, that you can celebrate however you want. You can also post pictures on social media and, get acceptance of your loved ones. And perhaps that's a way of you connecting with people who couldn't have made it. And that's okay too. But you should never miss the focus of the marriage, which is what binds you, the nikah, which is the marriage contract. And as long as you have gone through those and have understood your mutual roles and responsibilities within that, whatever else you do is not really as such an issue or a problem, as long as it's not harming anyone.
Right.
But of course, there shouldn't, the emphasis I would bring back to the document, because I just want to add one more thing here, that eventually, when do we read the nikah? It's
right before the marriage ceremony, or in some cases I've just seen women sign them off. Madam, you would agree with me on this, because a lot of times we also see that women are not even given that chance to read the marriage contract. It is just presented to them and they have to sign it, and they just have to say that yes, they agree to the terms. But when we talk about the social media perspective, because I understand that your perspective would be very different from hers, because you've not come from that era where we had all these technological advancements, we had social media too. So how do you compare and contrast marriages to what they were at the time that you were growing up, you were getting married, to what they are now, especially in the social media context?
I think at that time also it was very important to consider as to what was the age of marriage, because the basic thing is informed consent. And informed consent must be in the same sitting. one party proposes and the other party accepts, and it couldn't be either. There's no hard and fast rule that it's always the male
Right.
who is proposing and the female who is accepting. In fact, the first marriage of our Holy Prophet, peace be on him, was with Khadijatul Kubra, and she proposed to him. So disparity in age is of no consequence. When the marriage takes place is also of no consequence, as long as both parties understand that everything has been fully disclosed. Disclosure is the most important thing,
Right.
which really matters.
Disclosure is a very important thing, and then again the responsibility comes on the nikah registrar here, also on the families and the respective parties too, because a lot of times we see the parties also hide some very important details. Sir, I'll come to you here. We must talk about this very important part of the Muslim marriage contract, which is the dower. So when we talk about the haq mahr or dower, we understand that there are three very important clauses of the marriage contract which very particularly deal with it. But Islamically, if a husband doesn't give a wife the dower, or for that matter, if the quantum of that dower is not very particularly fixed, then what might be the consequences?
See, number one thing is, again, because when you not taking this into consideration, so you'll mess things up. So these things are decided beforehand. That's where the elderly people comes into effect. Right, many a times, when the bride and the groom, when they get married, and they're into many things and all that, they sometimes don't understand what this is. If we look at it from that perspective, that look, I am going to honor my wife by giving her a gift, right? So instead of looking at, look, we have to give this much money or this thing to her, it's again, you are that beautiful relationship, you are measuring in terms of money. It's not, yes, it's money, we are looking at the assets and all that, but remember, it's honoring the lady.
It's respecting the lady.
Yes, that is something, it's been emphasized in Islam. This is, again, I said, in Islam, it's been a lot of been stressed, like when I have many a times, I remember I conducted a nikah, and I sent the groom 3 times back. He said, okay, I'm going to this much. I said, no, I know how much you earn. Rethink about it. The 3rd time he came, I said, this looks reasonable. Right, we'll go for that. And the other extreme is that sometimes the people who are representing the girl, they said, no, we want these assets, this must gold and all that.
Right.
So again, both extremes are wrong. They are not getting, this is not the wedlock, they're turning it into a transaction. So this is, the wedlock is based on muhabba and the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So when we do our actions is based on the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's not just the wedding you're doing. Remember, Allah is happy from you, one, then you're fulfilling the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So I wanted to say that it's very important to remain balanced in there, and what the boy can afford, right? It's not something which the whole family of the boy can afford or something,
right.
Or it's not something like you just ignore that at all, and then it has to be paid to the girl as well.
Of course. So it's just not one thing, it's a combination of so many other factors. It has to be equitable, it has to be fair, very rightly so mentioned, it has to be balanced too. I would want you to comment on this further, because I also understand the fact that you've been giving all these training workshops as well, very actively advocating for making people aware about the importance of marriage contract as well. So what importance in the course of your workshops is placed on actually telling people the importance of dower? Because a lot of times you even see that people, especially women, they don't even know the basic difference between what is prompt dower, what is deferred dower.
As you said, there are these specific clauses in the nikah, and if they are filled out accurately, I would say half the litigation that we are facing in the courts would just vanish. And that's where we emphasize again on reading the nikah and knowing what exactly that is, and writing everything adequately without any ambiguity. So there is prompt dower that is given at the time of marriage, and then there is deferred dower, which is given at a time that is a later time, not at the time of the marriage. However, what happens is that when they write deferred dower, they don't specify when will it be given, and then we have litigation in the court. They don't specify entirely in what manner will it be? Will it be
Right.
gold? Will it be, you know, how much is the
There is
amount? Will it be
vagueness,
cash?
basically.
There's a lot of vagueness into it, and there are reforms right now that are, you know, in discussion about changing the clauses of the nikah to perhaps be more accurately define what exactly has been given by the groom to the bride. It's not the family that has to give, and it is not the family that has to receive from either side. This is also not entirely a gift. What it is her fundamental right. So this is something that is important for her financial security, and this is not something that can be decided in taking them out of context. It is very important, because I have known in our trainings that we did with workshops and seminars with boys as well, in universities and schools, and we found out, especially with married men, they didn't know what was the haq mahr, and they're the ones who are supposed to give it, because ultimately they're not reading the nikah.
Right.
It's also coming to them at the last minute,
So
or at the
basically
time it's being
everybody
announced.
needs to be sensitized, and including by that virtue, I would extend that to the respective bride and bridegroom's families too, because usually it's them who are cutting out all these clauses. But madam, coming towards you, then it's equally important that we also talk about the other clauses of the nikah. In this regard, we understand that clause 17 of the marriage contract very clearly allows any woman to enter any special conditions, even a man for that matter, if they have any. Could you tell us what is it that they perhaps can add, and what is it that they need to steer clear of? Because we understand that public policy considerations coming into play in this regard too.
One thing you see, supposing there are no male children in the girl's family. The parents, like Moses, he went and he became a family man to the wife's family. And then he was able to protect the father-in-law, who was an old man, and also his sister-in-law, and also his wife. So all these things could be added, and it could be to a terrific advantage, because there are so many families which don't have any male children, and for them it's very necessary to be able to include that in the prenuptial agreement, that the male will come and stay in the house of the female.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it's permissible. And also as to what is the marriage age, they can determine that. Supposing they have entered into this prenuptial arrangement and still want to wait, they can wait, and they can marry at the age which is suitable, so that the woman also understands her responsibilities. And now, when everything has become so expensive, she can find a place for herself in society, particularly rural women, talking about just now. They work in the fields, and whatever they earn is added to the family income. And Khadija has written this book on Muslim family laws, and in that it is important to remember what she has contributed towards the income of the family. Basically. And when the family, for any reason, decides to fall apart, then at least it's divided equally.
That's so important, because we do see post-divorce, unfortunately, women, as per the law, they don't have any right, and this is something that needs to be reformed in our law, because it is extremely unfair to the woman. A woman, she spends her entire life making the whole household, sacrificing on her career as well, and in the end she doesn't get anything in this regard. But when it comes to also making women aware, especially the rural women, something which Madam very rightly so mentioned, who do comprise a very large part of the Pakistani population here, how do you propose can we educate them? Because then again, this is something which comes with a lot of social stigma. There have been people who say that yes, they do go out to villages, they do reach out to such women.
I think it's important to go to as many women as you can. Whichever organization is working, they should specifically go to those rural communities, set up legal aid camps, talk to those women, and what would really help, show them the nikah. I just want to give you an example of one of the trainings that we conducted, and it was in one of the madrasas. A lot of women gathered over there, and one of the women, I showed her the nikah, and she secretly came to me and asked me, can I please keep a copy of the nikah? I said, of course, this is for you. And she said, it's not for me. I just want to ensure that when my daughter gets married, I will show her this copy. because I know that even many years from now she will not be allowed to see the nikah. And this is my way of educating her right now. So showing the copy of the nikah, going clause by clause on what it is about and what rights can be protected, giving them live examples of rights that have been protected. For example, there are judgments, which I have noted in the book that we have contributed to as well, that do safeguard women's financial rights when they're written in the nikah. They do say that women have equal ownership of the property of the husband's household, and that is enforced. So it is important that women know that they have these rights. It is only then they will ask for them, and it is only then that some of them will actually succeed in getting them.
Right, but then you see this access of information will only come when they have that influx of information. So it's again a vicious cycle to start off with. So what role can religious scholars, Islamic scholars like yourself play in this regard? Because we have seen people like yourself have had a very important role to play throughout, even during the COVID-19 times. I remember all the Islamic scholars, they had such an important role to play when it came to busting so many myths which did then surround the COVID-19 vaccine. So why not also use this power for a better purpose to save the institution of marriage when it comes to cases like these?
I think the ulama or the religious scholars all over the world, they do play a role.
Right.
But in the current time, the role of the social media has increased at a greater propensity.
Right, sir.
And it is changing the trends and even the thinking of the people, how we go towards these relationships. So that's one thing. So that needs to be, because it's very important, where I come to the same point again, to give value to this event, to this nikah. You see, nikah nama or the nikah certificate comes later on. First comes the event. Like, look at generally how people quickly do it, right? What, like, we are here for nikah, right?
It's just not about focusing on the extravagance and of course having a lavish wedding. It's also about focusing equally on the core fundamentals. In this regard, one positive trend that we do see, and this is something that we do see emerging in the cases of many celebrities, even Pakistani celebrities, that they have by choice and voluntarily opted for more simpler weddings, where they've made sure that yes, what they are doing is something which perhaps doesn't even have a cost to the environment too. So this is something that we need to welcome. This is something that we need to encourage.
I would like to add, you know, in West, one of the reason why not to get wedded is the cost. And Islam gave us a solution 1400 years ago. You don't have to do event 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so forth. That's the event, nikah done, then the boy has to do walima, right? And that's it, end it. Whereas, and that's one of the reason, and we unfortunately, we are going on the same road, that we are increasing the cost or the expenditures done on the wedding. Now, similarly, another factor is that informing yourself, educating yourself, like marriage is a big challenge.
Right.
There's a new phase of life, right? Are you ready for it? Nobody thinks about that.
Another thing that I would want to put to you, and I would want you to comment further, is the fact that generally we also see now this strata of the Pakistani society, more particularly younger people, voluntarily decide not to get married. So what is the Islamic stance on the importance of marriage? This is something on which I would want you to deliberate.
First of all, remember the Prophet ﷺ said that nikah is my sunnah. The Prophet ﷺ have, alhamdulillah, many nikahs. But now, and all of a sudden when we say many nikah, the people start going into many marriages, and then the rights of the woman again come into action. Is very important. But why getting married? Now, before that, I would like you to, why these young people have got this perception. It's either the parents or the people around, or the news which the foreign news that they come across and all that. Remember, the social structure of the West is different from us. This is very, very important. In the West, is individual who lives a life, right? I was amazed, one of the top financial shows in America, a question came to him that my father has come to my house and started living with me. And guess what the expert said?
What?
Try to get your father out of the house. It's your life, it's your money.
I wouldn't be surprised,
Right?
because you see, then
So-
we don't have that culture, we don't have those socio-cultural norms, and of course the religion itself has a very different stance on this too. Madam, you wanted to add something to
Alim
this
said,
as well.
Our holy prophet particularly said, nikah is my sunnat, and that person who does not perform nikah is not part of my ummat. Which means that nikah is something compulsory. And why? Because it legitimizes the relationship between two genders. And unless that happens, it cannot be legitimized. And
Of
the other
course.
thing is that when one person adds to the family of another, this example that was given, that the father, where would the father go? If the father was not allowed to stay in the house, would he go to an old people's home? I'm very glad to know that very few old people's homes exist in Pakistan, but the number is going up, and I think that is a very disgraceful reflection
Of the society.
on our society, because this is not what our society is all about. It's the integrated family which
Exactly.
is supposed to live together, and if you have your elders in your family, you are supposed to look after them like they looked after you when you were a child. Balki a Quran Majid says, Rabbir hamhuma kama rabbayani sagira. That when I was small, my parents looked after me. Now it's my responsibility to look after them, and that is part of the Quran. So
That's so
it's
true.
instilled into our culture.
Into
that
a
we have
system
to-
as well.
Yes.
It's just too sad basically, because this is something, madam, that we take pride in, having a strong family value system, and this is something which is in stark contrast with the West. And this is why exactly, sir, I put this question to you, so that you may clear the Islamic stance on this too. But madam, coming towards you again and moving towards the end of the show here, so in a nutshell, if we were to wrap today's conversation up, then what are the do's and what are the don'ts in your wisdom that you would want to pass on to the audience of the show today, that what is it that they should look for in any marriage or any marriage contract?
First of all, it is the relationship between the couple, which is the most important. But it's not just the couple itself that counts. You have to also take into focus the parents. And where are the parents going to go? When the family, they are growing older, naturally they need to be looked after. And there's so much advantage. Like if I were having parents-in-law and I wanted to leave my children at home, I could leave them with my parents-in-law.
Right.
And now my children leave their children with me. So at least there's always an asset. There's an upside and there's a
And a
downside.
downside. So true.
And we have to see that we keep the family integrated, because the family is the basic unit
Right.
of the Islamic system.
And the family, of course, is based on the relationship of marriage, which in itself emanates from the nikah nama. So when we talk about the marriage contract or the nikah nama, what advice would you give to the people with regards to getting it registered? Yes, they have entered that contract, but another step is also to get it registered, so it is on the state record as well. What possible issues can they steer clear of if they do end up getting it registered?
I mean, that is the prima facie proof that your marriage is valid. So it's not no longer a choice, it's a legal responsibility upon the nikah registrars to register the marriage. And there is also a legal punishment on the nikah registrar if the marriage is not registered. And if we're talking about Punjab, then it has to be registered within 30 days of the nikah being solemnized. So that if it's not happened, then there is imprisonment as well as fine upon the nikah registrars for not doing so. Because once, it's a very ugly situation when any one party is saying, I'm not married. And there are, say, children from, in the picture as well. So registration of the marriage gives you that prima facie proof, that protection that this marriage is actually valid. And obviously, it is absolutely mandatory. I just want to add that the law strictly punishes the nikah registrars more for not registering the marriage rather as opposed to cutting out columns of the nikah nama. That also is a fine and imprisonment. But the imprisonment and fine for not registering the marriage is even more because of the social implications and social problems that could come as a result of.
So many eventualities. It is that one registration, it is that one document which will actually save you. On which I'll come to you, sir, and before we conclude today's show, we must talk about this entire concept of marriage counseling and seeking therapy if there are any issues in your wedlock. So in this regard, how do you advise can people timely seek intervention so as to possibly avoid consequences which might be disastrous for their relationships? Because we do see that if such therapy is given timely, people might even steer clear of divorces.
First of all, I think we need to, before getting married again, get ready for the marriage. And then once you're in the marriage, live a principle-centered life or marriage. That's one thing. Because that will, even if you're parting away or you got some friction in there, you can agree on something. And then comes the role of elderly people.
Right.
So in our structure, if anything's happening, you know, number one, sharing with the elders, and then they come into action. So and their role is very pivotal for resolving the situation.
Right, sir.
Many a times, you see now, unfortunately, sometimes I see we need to, even type of elderly people we're getting nowadays, is they increase the dispute. Right? So the elderly people should, or the family, or whoever is influential within the couple, right? It can be a friend.
It can be anybody. It can be even be, for that matter, professionally trained therapists, because we do see this entire marriage counseling concept. It has picked up momentum, especially in the last few years, where we even have government set centers where people, even before they file for divorces, they have to, as a mandatory requirement, go under that mediation or counseling session so as to be able to find out what the differences are and timely work towards them as well.
I would definitely agree to that. You know, many a times we think that going to these psychologists or the people who can help us out or the counselors, right, at the last moment, right, and now they're going to put everything in a U-turn, everything will come to right. Now, you've taken ages to destroy, right, now to set things right, is it going to take what, 4 days, 3 days? So similarly, it's very important to have that professional support there, and again, that professional should be a professional in that.
Right, of course.
Not somebody who's
that's understood.
To be that.
That should be somebody who should be professionally trained to carry out those duties. Right, sir. Your point is noted. On that note, I would like to conclude today's show. Thank you so much, madam, for your time today. Thank you so much, Ms. Khatija, and thank you so much, sir, for being here with us today. Well, to conclude today's show, we generally spoke about the ever-evolving and ever-changing marriage and wedding celebration trends as they have evolved in the Pakistani society. We also spoke about the fact that in this regard, how has social media actually impacted the way we actually perceive the institution of marriage. In this regard, it's very important then to understand the fact that keeping the celebratory and keeping the festivity mode aside, what is very important to focus upon is, of course, the marriage contract, because this is that one contract which gives you that right, which actually defines the way you would want to live with somebody for the rest of your life. And if you are being given that right, then it is very important to utilize this right, that too intelligently and constructively. Thank you for watching The Society. Until next time, take care and Allah Hafiz.